A lot of folks have asked me if I have a video about how I installed the floor in my Toyota Sienna. I did the installation over a couple of months, so I didn't do a video, but I took a lot of pictures, so I thought I would share a slideshow on how that progressed. I started out by buying some of the essentials. How would I go to the bathroom? How would I cook? And how would I power my refrigerator? So once I had those items, then I was ready to go ahead and start the build. I hired someone to help me with the heavy lifting on the floor. And I started by doing some cutouts of the items that would be essential for my trips. This picture shows basically the seats out and how I did the cutouts. After watching a bunch of videos on YouTube, I decided that I wanted 2 sheets of plywood with a seam down the middle. That just made more sense for me and more stability. So here we are fitting the initial plywood and cutting out the contours for how the floor would lay once it was cut on both sides. So the seam would be in the middle, and that would give me stability on the sides. I didn't want the seam to be on the sides because of getting in and out. I figured that would be the most wear and tear on a piece of plywood, and so that's why I ended up with 2 pieces of plywood with the seam in the middle. This picture shows basically 1 piece in, and let me tell you, that was a lot of work. In this picture, we are leveling up the pieces of plywood once they were cut. The Toyota Sienna that I have has floor vents, so we had to put in pieces of 2x4 underneath the plywood to make the floor level. Here we go, putting in both pieces to do fits. There were so many fits. It was crazy getting the contours of the side and then cutting it down the center. But here we go. They're both in and they're level. Once we did this, I realized I wanted the back to have a hatch so that I could have a garage per se where the 3rd row seats were. And so this was building that out. There was a lot of sanding. There was a lot of trial and error and fitting over and over. And so we were able to get everything in, but at this point I realized I needed to tie things down. So I used the existing framework of the Sienna, and I just tied down the 2x4s, and then we screwed in the 2x4s to the pieces of plywood. This is the framework that was built to support the trapdoor that would let me get in and out of my garage. It is not tied to anything under there, but it is screwed into the top pieces of plywood that were underneath the floor. This picture shows, I think, the final flooring, and everything was leveled out, everything was screwed in to the pieces of plywood, the pieces of 2x4 that were underneath, and now I'm ready for some flooring. I chose some flooring from Home Depot, and so this part we did ourselves. We started basically putting flooring down and cutting along the contours. The places where it was glued down were along the side doors and in the back along the trapdoor. Those were the pieces that I felt would move because of the movement of in and out and the open and the close of the trapdoor. So those were the only ones that were glued down. The rest of the pieces were snapped together and just put in place. This shows that being done. And this shows basically how we ended up finishing the whole floor. It was a lot of work. Once the floor was in, we did a dry fit, and then we came back and we removed the pieces that needed to be glued down. This is the supervisor that was giving us the okay to move forward. If she didn't give the okay, then we didn't move forward. Used some Loctite. That's how we ended up gluing things down that needed gluing down. This is the trapdoor being held down with some weights after the Loctite. This is along the side doors. We use clamps to glue those down and let that dry up. Here's the other side. We also glued down the front boards because we didn't want any of those moving forward while I was driving. And here we go. There's the completed floor with the top vinyl on it. It was a lot of work, a lot of fun. Once we finished that, I wanted some edging just to make it look finished. And so we bought some edging at Home Depot and put that along the front and along each of the side doors, and then also along the back where the trapdoor was. This shows where the trapdoor is open and where I put my garage tools and such. This is the finished floor with the bed on it. Kind of shows the perspective of how it looks. This is with the power station and the fridge in. You could see the front where it has the finishing. And then here we go on the trapdoor. I just bought a piece of leather and screwed that in so I can open and close the trapdoor, take it out, and get to the garage. And this is the finished van with the supervisor in it giving us a seal of approval. That's it. Hope you enjoyed the tour.